Rewatching Winx Club Season 1 as an adult made me notice that the show never introduced the specialists as characters, but as love interests. This framing, prioritizing romance over depth, made masculinity into an accessory instead of exploring the characters' development, motivation, and emotions. I will attempt to fill in the gaps of the archetypes the show provided to give the specialists some opportunity to shine as individuals. So get cozy, go grab your crochet, do your dishes, whatever it is that you like doing as you watch this video, and let us deep dive into the specialists. As you may have seen in the thumbnail, I think of the specialists as discount Jedis. And for those of you who have seen Star Wars, or at least are somewhat familiar with it, you might understand what I mean by that, which is that they have the same weapons and were inspired by, galactic warriors, but are basically the washed down version of that. And the reason why I say this is because the specialists, often accompanied by an epic soundtrack, come into the scene to the rescue of the Winx, but always end up being saved by the Winx in some way, shape or form. Now, I'm not saying that it's good or it's bad, but my issue is that the specialists never got to really be specialists and succeed without the fairies intervening in some way, shape or form. And the few times that they were doing their own thing, we just saw how incompetent they were at their own job, or how childish they were, mainly because of Sky, who called himself Brandon, and Riven. So I'm going to give each of the specialists some attention. Unfortunately, Timmy and Brandon won't get too much analysis, as there isn't much to build upon that is given in the show, so that their parts are going to be significantly shorter. For those who have watched future seasons, you know that we do get more from these boys later on, but not in season 1. Brandon, let's start with him because he is slightly more present in the series. We realize that he is technically Sky's servant and takes Sky's identity to protect him. He is very loyal, very reasonable, a complete flirt, but also an honest guy, and he is quite absent-minded, actually. The number of times that he kind of is doing something else in the middle of a fight is a bit too repetitive not to mention it, but he is the voice of reason with Timmy and isn't necessarily listened to, unfortunately, which does lead to some, issues. But yeah, there isn't much to say about Brandon in season 1, but he is pretty much a solid guy all around. Now Timmy. Timmy is clumsy and clever. He is quite sweet. He gives really good advice, like Brandon, and more often than Brandon, and advice that is quite emotionally complex and sensitive. So he's got that going for him. Unfortunately, we don't really get much about Timmy, which, it's actually not a bad thing in Winx Club, because the less we know about the characters, usually the better they are as people, whereas the more screen time they have, usually the least likable they are going to be, or the more problematic they are, or the more inconsistencies with writing we will find to them. So not much to say about Timmy, apart from the fact that he's really reasonable, always helpful, and also a solid guy and a solid friend. If we could have had more of Timmy and Brandon, that would have been awesome, because they are actually good portrayal of just solid, nice, people. And unfortunately, they aren't given the screen time, because why would the show do this? Instead of showing healthy, normal, young men that are good friends, as they would be solid boyfriend material as well, or at least not as bad as the remaining two, but yes, the remaining two are the ones that get all of the focus. If you're enjoying yourself watching or listening to this, please like this video, as it greatly helps push this video to more people. You know, it helps with the algorithm. Let's get to Sky and Riven, shall we? This is where I'm going to start to theorize and add onto what we know from the show, because there are some hints that I can build upon that would make them make more sense than what they do with just what the show gives us. So Sky and Riven, I find, and I'm going to talk about the both of them at the same time, they are, to me, stereotypical male leads that you would find in non-healthy romance story. Whereas you have Sky, the good guy that is unseemingly entitled and self-righteous, and you have Riven, the classical bad boy that the good girl goes after, even though his behavior is quite problematic. And these two, you know, I'm talking about together because they're like pushed really hard as boyfriend material, and they really aren't, first of all. And as I said, the thing that is really a shame in Winx Club is that the boys were not, well, actually the girls weren't that developed either, apart from Bloom, and even Bloom's development doesn't make that much sense. And mainly they are here in the story to serve as the romantic interests, which is a shame, because I would rather have the Winx stand on their own feet, the boys standing on their own feet, be interesting as characters before we really put romance into the whole mix. But, you know, I didn't write the show, did I? I still enjoy the show, despite all of the qualms I have with it. I thought I should mention that to you. Anyways, Riven and Sky, I think, are mirrors of each other in the sense that they are both really insecure, and they trigger each other's insecurities, probably because they are quite similar, actually, that they get on each other's nerves so much. Now, is that touched upon in the show? Not really. So this is, you know, something I'm kind of like extrapolating a little bit. So let's, you know, roll back a little bit and talk about what we do know from the show. Sky, obviously, living a double life, because he is living as Brandon, even though he's a prince of Heraklion. He's quite a good listener, all things considered, I will give him that. He is quite bad at listening to advice, wise advice and wise counsel, so he's good at listening other people talk, not so much about people telling him what he's doing wrong, which is where I think the self-righteousness ties in. That isn't really explicitly said in the show, but I am just adding onto what I understand of his character. He is pretty good at all of the classes, so is Riven, but you know, Sky's number one, and Riven technically is probably like number two, his rival. You know, they've got a whole rivalry going on. He is portrayed and shown as the good guy, but notice all of the non-good guy things he does, even though he is the good guy. Like, for example, when Riven is being a misogynistic douche, and Sky just stands there, clenches his fist, more angry, seemingly, about the fact that Riven is going after his girl than the things he's actually saying. And no one actually intervenes with all of the stuff he's saying. And Bloom has like to, you know, pour water all over the guy, like, you know, and no reaction. So, you know, it's kind of like, where's the good guy in here, right? And then you have the whole thing with Jaspro. Like, Sky never actually properly apologizes to Bloom about the whole thing. Rewatch the episode when they return from Domino and listen to what he says. He says, sorry about the whole Jaspro thing. Not sorry about thinking you were the incarnation of an evil witch and being disgusted by it. Not saying sorry for ignoring all of your calls and being distant and not knowing how to talk to you. Not sorry for lying to you about my identity and leading you on even though I had a fiancé. Not sorry about I actually have lost track of what he could be sorry for, but like, he just said sorry about the Jasper situation and now we are not engaged anymore, and that is accepted as like good. And I'm like, what? How is Jasper the bad guy in all of this? And mind you, this is something I already caught on when I was a kid. I was like, why is Jasper being the bad guy here when the guy's got a fiance and like he is like, he likes Bloom, but he's got a fiance and he doesn't tell Bloom that he's got a fiance. You know, like, this whole thing is messy, but it's on Sky. It's not on either of the girls. And then it leads to this whole spectacle between the two of them that humiliates Bloom entirely in front of Sky's parents and all of Red Fountain and the teachers and everybody, you know? So I'm like, that's it? So, you know, like the whole self-righteous thing, yeah, I'm a good guy, I'm Prince Sky. I really don't like this character, and I think, well, there is not too much explanation to why Sky is the way he is, but it's quite clear that he is insecure and gets really jealous, and we do know that in later seasons he gets really jealous, but you see it already in season 1, because remember, before there is this whole presentation in Red Fountain where the guys, you know, ride their motorcycles or like ride the dragons and do this whole show, Riven at some points pokes at Sky blatantly so, and then says, oh yeah, she's he says about Bloom, oh yeah, she's dating around all of these boys and whatever. Notice Sky's reaction then when he gets jealous of the fact that a girl that is not his girlfriend, that he's interested in but hasn't said anything to, and like he feels like he's being betrayed even though they're not a thing. I will repeat this again. They are not a thing. They're not an item until the last episode of season 1. They are not in a relationship. And yet the two of them act as though they have been in a relationship the whole time. And sure, you could say it was kind of ambiguous, but like, they weren't dating, you know? So like, don't feel so entitled to someone's time or someone's actions if you're not actually someone to them. Anyways, to tie back to the whole insecurity thing, which is why Sky gets jealous, I think Sky gets insecure about being accepted by people in terms of like relationship. And now again, this is like where I'm really like thinking about it, because the show hasn't said anything about that, but I think he's jealous because he's insecure that he's going to be accepted by people, and this could be related to the fact that he is a prince and therefore has never really had normal relationships with people, you know, or normal interactions with people, because as we have seen, the royals in Winx Clubs can have quite terrible manners sometimes, or terrible ways of saying things, as we have seen with Stella. So it wouldn't be that strange that Sky also has this thing where he's very much insecure about what he brings to a relationship, especially when he is hiding the fact that he's a prince. So he's just like as a nobody. But the thing is, he also does not realize the privilege that comes with being a prince and acts very princely when he should realize that actually a normal person would not say or do these things, which I think is something that Riven caught on, even without knowing that Sky was actually the Prince of Heraklion and not Brandon. If you're still watching this right now and haven't been on the channel before, welcome new viewers, and also thank you to the return viewers, as I know there are quite a few of you, and I always find you back in the comments too, which is really fun. Becoming Bamboo is the channel where I share my journey of rewriting the mind, building resilience, finding balance in mind, body and soul using tools like hypnotherapy, storytelling and other holistic tools. Join me in my journey to becoming Bamboo. Is it giving specialist, or is this giving like confused person, or I actually don't know what else you could think this is. Maybe like I actually don't know. This is quite an odd outfit, isn't it? Anyways, yeah, do tell me in the comments down below. Now, on to Riven, because again, as I said, Riven and Sky just trigger the hell out of each other, in my opinion. And if Sky is an entitled, self-righteous prince, not to say the other word that sounds kind of similar, but I am thinking it personally. If I were meeting him in person and he was an actual individual, I would think he was, you know. Anyways, Riven, I think, and again, we don't have a backstory for him, is probably from a very, very different background. I would say he's probably from a background that is more similar to Musa, in the sense that they are probably from like a more rural or like impoverished area, and he does give off the vibe of eat the rich, you know, like the amounts of comments he does about Prince Sky being a prince, or like having princely education, or like servants and that kind of stuff. I'm like, why are you making comments about that so much, unless it's somehow tied to your own insecurity of maybe coming from a background where you had to claw your way to the top. And I think it would make a lot of sense for how Riven is in general, and how much of a douche he is for majority of season 1, 3/4 of it actually. That, you know, his defense mechanism is always like attacking people first before he can be hurt, and being like, yeah, you're lesser than me. Why do you need to assert your own self by pushing other people down? It means that you're not sure of your own strength and power if you have to remind others that you are more, or you think that this is what confidence is. So I would argue that Riven probably grew up also surrounded by other misogynistic people, I think, because it kind of gives us this vibe of like, this is what he grew up around. And also, you know, this whole eat the rich, and then not knowing how to interact with girls or women at all, and being really sorry for saying this, an ass about it. Day of the Rose thing, where he gets into a fight with Bloom, Sky and everybody. He goes away and he says, I don't need no girls, I don't need nobody. I do think this is like a big hint as to what kind of background he comes from, which is the strict opposite of Prince Sky, who would have been surrounded by people who would do anything at his beck and call, and was entitled to other people in a way that Riven never was. You know, are you catching on what I'm trying to establish here? Another thing too, once Riven, and this is like when Riven goes through some major character development, especially when you look at what kind of person he was before, when he gets imprisoned, well, of course, let's not forget that he was seduced by power. Again, would make sense with what I'm saying. If he's from a background that he had to claw his way through life, of course he would try to grasp power any way he could to make sure that he was safe and he was strong. You know. Anyways, after he's captured by the tricks and realize how bad they actually are, so he has some morality in him, even though it was a bit hard to find as a viewer. The tricks like cast this spell on him that's basically psychological torture because it's like revealing his worst fears to him. Riven basically in his cell faces his shadow, and I mean his psychological shadow, like all of the parts about him that aren't likable, that he doesn't accept. He had to face that, and he had to speak to himself and acknowledge that, yeah, some parts of him really are monstrous, and it is up to him to own up to that. I mean, that is like big. That's like self-awareness on some level that, you know, no other character really goes through something like this, which I wish it would have gotten a little bit more screen time just so that we could explore this, because it was really interesting. And by the way, I did talk about the shadow in my Halloween special that got basically the views. So if you want to know more about the concept of the psychological shadow, I talked about it a bit there. So I'll link the video in the description as well if you're interested. Anyways, back to Riven. He goes through this whole thing and then manages to escape, manage to do some lockpicking, escape, and then survive. So yes, of course, he was given classes on that. But the lockpicking part too, I'm like, that would really go well with the whole backstory that I am imagining for him, so that he makes sense as a character and his interactions with Sky make sense. What do you think about that? Do you think I'm onto something, or do you have another theory? I personally do think this does make sense. There is another explanation. I would be happy to read it, so do comment down below what you think about this. If you're enjoying this video, I will ask a great favor from you. Hit the subscribe button and follow along as I do similar content about other shows and talk about character psychology and self-development, that kind of thing. Basically, that's all we really have on The Specialist. You will have noticed I haven't really expanded on Brandon's backstory or Timmy's backstory, basically because they haven't really shown a character trait that I could infer a possible reasoning for, as Riven and Sky have. And if you have watched Winx Club, you know that their turn will come. So they got like basically not even 2 minutes this time, but know that they will be granted a lot more attention later once we do have enough information to really talk about them. Regardless of what I think the specialists are like, I know, unfortunately, having watched later seasons, that we never really get to have the specialists as people. And actually, I do know that though there is some character development in season 2 and 3, I'm not going to say more in case you haven't seen it, which I doubt, because you probably have if you're watching me doing this whole analysis. But I know that after season 4 and onwards, it's getting worse, actually. I mean, even the Winx. So the specialists are certainly not spared in terms of character development, or even them as characters making any sense whatsoever or having any presence. They're usually just there as arm candy, don't really achieve anything that is, you know, that goes with them being guardians, warriors, you know. So this ties in back to what I was saying about discount Jedis, and this is a problem with the writing. Like, the guys are given no moment to shine, to like really properly shine. And yes, I know in the comments you will probably be able to tell me that, oh, in season 2 this person that may or may not have long hair did this, and in season 3 2 of them might have done something. I know, but like in general, they're really overlooked as characters, which is no surprise when you see that the Winx are too, and they're actually the main characters. But still, like, I don't like the fact that in a kids show that is, let's face it, targeted to young girls, the guys are just shown as props. I have said it. That's all they're for. And also, for a whole show that's about learning about magic, it's incredibly centered on the romance. And it's not even like a good romance. It's more like a bad otome. If you know what kind of game that is, right? Like, that is what bothers me most about Winx Club. And unfortunately, it's not something that really changes. And yeah, the specialists are definitely the victim of that. Has anyone perchance watched Huntix? I think it was called Huntix. It was done by, I think, the same creators, and it was, I think, geared more towards young boys. I love that show, mainly because the male characters also contributed and the female characters weren't like completely sidelined either. You know, like both, like all of the characters contributed to something. Like not all of them were good or interesting, but for the most part, you know, it was pretty good. So yeah, that's my issue with how the specialists are being used by the storyline in Winx Club. And if you have made it the whole way through the video, don't hesitate to like, comment, or subscribe, as it greatly helps push this video forward to other people.